Hey guys, how's it going? I'm the Duke of Italy, favorite lo-fi music YouTuber, and welcome to part 2 of the results for Nothing But Black Metal November. And I'm very excited because last time was pretty good. Had a lot of strong contenders. One DQ, but overall, like, quite a few great albums. And, I mean, this year already kind of failed because we had a DQ already. And I want to get a year where everything's great, no DQs. But, you know, not everything's a winner. And this time, you're going to notice not everything's a winner again. But I will honestly say, I think this episode has more interesting albums overall. Some more stylistic variation that's still appropriate or just interesting or effective. So I'm very excited for that. But I don't really want to beat around the bush too much because I'm just excited to talk to you guys about these albums today. So let's get into them, and I'll tell you what I think. Up first, we have a rather popular band this year, and one that shows up again at the very, very end of the list, Lamp of Murmur, with Air of Ecliptical Romanticism. This is their debut album, not of Submission and Slavery, which was their more recent album, which has a lot more post-punk influence. This one is more like a combination of several different second wave bands, and it progresses the sound to just this amazing, amazing angle. I felt definitely hints of Dark Throne and Immortal here, and several other bands. And honestly, it's a shame that this album here has as much hype as maybe more modern bands like Kekta Rocked, for example, with that Pale Swordsman album that came out this year. That album was okay, but it's not even close to the quality of this one. Or especially Spectral Wound. I thought Spectral Wound's album this year was honestly not that good. But this one here, we've got a solid album. This album has really solid and gripping riffs, and it's fast, it's super raw, which is only seen a couple times on this list, one of them being the next Lamp of Murmur album. The song Bathing in Cascades definitely has more of a late period Immortal feel with the sort of black and thrash melodic riffs that work just excellently in this type of song. Honestly, you will not be bored by this album. You'll be hooked in immediately, and honestly, it's super satisfying once it all concludes also. It's just a punchy album, really good atmosphere, really good sinister feelings from the whole thing. This album is great. It's evil and it's powerful, and I can't get enough of it. The next album is Flagellant with Monuments. This is one of those albums that has zero time wasted, and sometimes that's sort of a good thing, and sometimes it's not. You kind of make that up for yourself, but it's literally instant blast beat, instant to the face riffs. It's instantly super fast and aggressive. And it's got one of my favorite sort of motifs in black metal, where you have these really heavy chords with these little tremolo like licks that follow at the end of the measure. That always honestly is a pretty appealing idea to me. Unfortunately, it uses it a lot, and the other riffs aren't as great on this album, but those are very solid. And it's decently dissonant too, which gives it a really interesting hellish feeling. In my opinion, after the first couple of tracks, the songs don't really stick out after that, but overall, this is a decent listen. I give this a good. Next is Aurav with Argentum. This was an EP, it's just about 25 minutes long, and it's kind of considered more experimental, and I like my experimental black metal. I love having stuff that's just piled on to this black metal idea and spread out into different directions. The thing is, this is not how I like it. It sounds weird and folky and twisted, which sometimes I can get with, but here it's just executed poorly. The guitars sound almost like Daughters. I forget the name of the Daughters guitarist, but they sound as noisy and insane as those guitars. The thing is, they just don't work here. They don't give a good cohesive feeling, and it just ends up kind of being boring. Also, there are a lot of like wolf howls in the back of this one. It's supposed to like give it some kind of wild feeling, but like it just makes me cringe. And also, every riff on this album is just straight tremolo picked. There's no like big power chords or like flashy like huge chords after the end of another chord, or like any interesting solos or chugs or anything at all, really. It's just all tremolo, and it's all super tame. It's just boring. And there are a couple times sort of towards the end of the album where it's like not tremoloed, but then it's just bad riffs overall. Honestly, I just say this album's like, it's way overly ambitious for people that can't even make straightforward good music. So honestly, it's kind of cringe. Stylistically, it's just a mess. So I give this a poor. But fortunately, this is one of like the bottom 3 albums on the chart. Next, we have a recent release, Kankar with Dunkel Millennia. Now, and again, these recent releases I don't really have high hopes for. Fortunately, this one wasn't bad. And of course, the last one that I covered wasn't bad either. Now, in terms of black metal, I mean, you're going to see a lot of elements on this album that are pretty standard, but I think the structurings of the songs themselves are actually pretty interesting. The vocals are gravelly, the riffs are impressive, the singer, or I guess vocalist, has a really thunderous presence on this release here. Also, the drumming is genuinely impressive. There are some moments of clean vocals on this album, which I will admit have their weak points, and honestly, some more interesting production, something more lo-fi, or just something more interesting would be a lot better for this album, but you know what? I'm willing to say this is good. Up next, we have a 90s album, a 90s Norwegian album, one that's kind of under the radar. This is Ragnarok with A Rising Realm. Now, this is quality, raw, slightly Viking-esque Norwegian black metal. And the riffs are decent, which is honestly like half the deal. The vocal sort of synth passages, you know, where it's like O's, but like from a synth. In almost any other context for me, I think they're super cringe. I've never been that huge on Emperor, kind of because of their synths. I think some of like Varg's usage of this type of synth has never gone that well. But here, honestly, they carry the whole thing. The way it's produced is just cacophonous enough to almost make those vocals sound like they're real. The song My Hate Is His Spirit is probably my favorite track here. It's really twisted and evil in terms of the atmosphere, which is honestly one of the reasons to listen to Norwegian black metal in the first place, is that it has such strong atmosphere. And I will say it's pretty generic for the time. Like you'll see the stuff done by like Enslaved and later period Bathory, or I guess mid-period Bathory, or heck, even referenced by other bands. But you know what? I'm willing to say it's good. It's pretty solid. Next, we have Shamash with the Maldoror chants, Hermaphrodite. Now, I couldn't find any information on this release in particular, whether or not it was an EP or an LP. It's over a half hour, so I consider an LP, but Shamash's other material is like over an hour and a half long for each album, which is weird. So I actually went into this album with really high hopes. I was like, wow, this is so conceptual and spacey and interesting. Then like, what is this? First of all, I'm disqualifying this for being dark ambient. But really, I'm never going to listen to it again because it's bad dark ambient. It truly sucks. It's so boring. Every release I saw online was like, wow, this thing meanders. It doesn't get to the point ever. There are more ambient pieces here than black metal. And in terms of the black metal pieces, those pieces are half ambient anyways. So in terms of active listening, you're doing none of it. In terms of active listening, you're getting no benefit from listening to it. Honestly, if you're going to listen to this, just be on your phone and do something worth your time more than listen to this directly. Yeah, there are spoken word bits here and there that are explaining like a lore or whatever, and you can barely even hear them because of the mixing, but it's just not good. And there are tiny little black metal portions here, but the riffs just consistently underperform. None of them are appealing at all. The production is like flat. It does not excel it in a way where I'm like, whoa, that's so crazy. It's carrying the riffs here, because I mean there is some bands whose riffs aren't that good, like a lot of Paysage D'Hiver's stuff, like Winter's riffs aren't that good, and you can kind of tell because on the new Paysage D'Hiver album, like the riffs are like more highlighted and they're not that good, but normally the sound works with the production. Here they just don't even work with the production. It's so flat, it's so boring, it never reaches at the point, or any point for that matter. It's just a waste of your time. So yeah, if you don't get it, it's a poor album. Next, at least, we get Satanic Warmaster with Corellian Satanist Madness. Now, this is, I think in terms of my chart, the first NSBM full length that I love, because this thing is awesome. It's got all like the typical NSBM like sounds that work for the subgenre, which a lot of people say it's like not a subgenre, but like if you listen to the best of the best NSBM albums, they're all raw. They all have like an atmospheric sound, and they all have like just interesting textures overall. And I mean, that's really all I can compliment it as a whole from like that perspective. But like, it's a shame because those are elements of black metal that I really enjoy. So this honestly sounds like Forest, the Russian Blazebirth Hall band, but with more bottom end, which is a thing that Forest selectively, I believe, doesn't use, where they have a really interesting like meditative sound that's based entirely off of drum and top end, but here they have bottom end, which gives it a lot more of a whole, I guess in a way, a standard sound, but it works so well with the raw mixing. It just sounds so just cathartic. It's really emotional. It's really moody. It's so easy to sink into. And for being raw but not overly noisy, there are a lot of like extended riffs beyond the typical tremolo stuff that is really what the appeal of this album is. Also, on the title track, there's like this chromatic riff that is just simply sublime. It sounds so good. And honestly, even the more straightforward tracks on this album just showcase these amazing riffs. And the thing about Satanic Warmaster, people debate if they're NSBM. I'm not going to really get into that. The last piece on this album is like a dark ambient piece, or a dungeon synth piece, I guess. And I thought I heard like Aryan mentioned one time. I'm not sure. It's lo-fi. It's really hard to tell. If it's talking about what I think it's talking about, like, I don't really get with that, but the rest of this album is great. So in terms of like, and also the textures on that last track are really great too. Like, it's really good sounding dungeon synth. So if you take it from like that value, which is kind of like how I listen to black metal anyway, this album's honestly great. But you could skip that last track and not lose that much. Up next, something totally different, AGALOG with Serpent Sphere, their final full length. Now this is AGALOG's sort of like folky, post-rock black metal stuff, which I listened to the Mantle a couple times and I couldn't get into it too much, but here you have something that I really actually enjoy. And it's really huge, doomy, drawn out black metal, which sounds just perfect. And it's like so adjacent to post-rock and elements, so they just make the jump and you get these amazing climaxes all over this album. And I even think the bass sound and the production as a whole sounds really cool. Of course, it's a little cleaner than your average black metal, but this isn't average black metal. This is quite different in terms of subgenres and other influences. It's a less hard-hitting approach than you'd expect from like post-rock black metal, because my first like idea when I think of that is probably like Liturgy, which they have like super fast, hard-hitting stuff that honestly I can't really get with. But I'm really glad that this is less hard-hitting instantly and it's more drawn out and it has a lot more interesting builds and it's so meditative. Honestly, this is like one of the most beautiful black metal albums ever. Most of songs like Celestial Effigy are like 99% black metal. Like, there are a few tracks on here that are like majority black metal, and all of them have at least like some black metal in them. So I'm pretty fine with this album being like 60-70% black metal of considering it like a black metal release. And the rest, I mean, a lot of black metal albums have like folky interludes and stuff, and this one does too. My only real flaw in this album is that the harsh vocals do sometimes lack, but honestly, like, it really goes to show on this album that sometimes you don't even need vocals at all to make a quality piece. This album is great. And in terms of a popular band's less popular pick, couldn't get much better because I wasn't even huge on the Mantle. So this actually impressed me a lot. But of course, I'll probably revisit the Mantle in the future. Next, we have Velchmeretz with Illustra Nos. Here you get really fiery and fast black metal, also really dissonant stuff too. And you can tell kind of straight away that this album here is utterly twisted. It's one of those like psychological black metal albums, but it doesn't rely too much on more drawn out sections or even like beautiful soundscapes or too much contrast. It kind of throws like a few different elements at you, and in a way it reminds me a bit of Silencer's approach, where like the topics and a few other elements are just so twisted and contrasting that it's really like a mental decay. But here, every song is so different from some like key texture or something that's added that just brings it like 3 levels higher, which I will mostly get to later. But for the first couple tracks, it's just brain-meltingly just horrific black metal. And the vocals are like frustrated and tortured. They're really interesting. And they're frantic too. They're just bouncing off the wall and you feel like you don't even know exactly when they're going to come in. And these quieter parts have pretty minimalist guitar parts, like actually like maybe like a single note per measure, not even tremoloed. and it just shows how high this album will go and how low it will go too. It's got such contrasts here that it's actually super interesting. It's packed to the brim with amazing content, and everything here is just so filled with talent and good ideas. There's even a track with like a violin, and there's a track with like a female like classical style singer, and it sounds just incredible. And it don't let that make it you think that it's any like calm. Like, it's still twisted the whole time. It's just utterly horrifying, and I can't get enough of this album. I think it's so strong. But yes, it's great. So great that it's probably top 5 on this whole list of all 60. I'm just gonna tell you straight up. Next is a re-listen. This is Talk with their debut album. Now, this is one of those albums that kind of reminds me of like Druth type sound. It's not quite Cascadian, but it's this really beautiful buzzy tone that's like bees in a tin can, as some fans of black metal would describe it. Adjacent, I guess, to the iconic Philosophem tone from Burzum. That is my favorite type of sound, and here it's decent too. I don't think it's as good as like Philosophem or Varg's other early albums, but here it's strong. The melodies are great on this album, which is too bad because the guitars are a bit buried, and I think, I don't know, maybe if it's like what I was listening to them on, but I just hope that like maybe my listen, maybe I was just caught off guard, because I do remember really enjoying this album, but here just the riffs didn't really bring it for me. The song 7 is just such a banger though, and it ends with this like acoustic riff that was like going throughout the song, and it's the longest song on the album. But it's just such an iconic melody. I can literally recite it right now. I mean, I won't. You guys will probably understand it once you listen to it, if you listen to it. But 7 is a total banger, and I feel like maybe I was just in a weird spot for the day I listened to it. But I'm going to say this album for now is a good. I might re-listen to it one more time in the future. Not sure, but I'll probably keep you guys posted. Up next, we have an EP by the band Thunderbolt. This is Black Clouds Over Dark Majesty. It's 18 minutes long, and I'm sure some of you might be pleased. This is the first and only band on this list that was NSBM, but now they're not. They just stopped being NSBM, so good for Thunderbolt, I guess. This is a heavy black metal sound, and it is certainly lo-fi, but it is not so raw or lo-fi that it's that notable. I really just say it just to kind of categorize the sound at the beginning here. There are some clean guitar parts here that really remind me of Abbott's guitar parts in, say, like Heart of Winter era Immortal, which is then followed by the more dense, heavy, distorted riffing, which is always a contrast that I enjoy. The thrown-in synths are also pretty good. They do add a little bit of texture. Unfortunately, some of the riffs are a bit too heavy and low-pitched to really accommodate well with the raw quality. They kind of blend together a bit too much. Kind of Swedish death metal-y, not entirely, but that's like a one vantage point I can kind of explain it as. But I'm going to say this EP is good, and support the band. They seem like fine people, I guess. I mean, it's your life. I can't really tell you exactly what to do, but hey. Next is Blackened Thrash, Funeral Winds, with Screaming for Grace. This is like one half of a split album that I like picked out of something. I honestly don't know how I got it, because it's just such a weird little like collection here. Like I kind of had to listen to it like separately. I don't think you can even acquire it like normally. Not to worry you guys though, like unless you want to be a completist with me on this chart, this release is just okay. I'm gonna say straight from here. But like it's really not that good. It's got this like cavernous raw sound that works for some bands. Also, in terms of Blackened Thrash, I can't even tell that this is Blackened Thrash. It's really just black metal. If there's anything I specifically dislike about this sort of half of a split or something, the intermission tracks are terrible. Just awful dungeon synth. Really doesn't do anything. Some of the riffs are decent. Some of them are not. The vocals are not good here. They're like, it's like high pitched and weak, but the whole thing here doesn't feel like DSBM, so it doesn't work. The title track itself is pretty thrashy, I guess. Overall, it's like I said earlier, it's okay. You can give it a skip. I'm not going to blame you. Up next is a classic band, Graveland, with their album Immortal Pride, and there's a reason you can't find this one on Spotify, if you're wondering. even though the band's political affiliations are seemingly NSBM, the only like album that even like hints towards that is Immortal Pride here. Fortunately, I'm not huge on this album, so you can give this one a skip, but apparently the rest of their discography is just awesome. Part of my reasoning for this is honestly that like you cannot find a good rip of this online. I like stitched together YouTube songs to listen to this thing, and even then it's like 5 songs total. 3 of them are dungeon synth and 2 of them are like 20-minute black metal, like stitched together like proggy songs. I don't even know. Also, in terms of like NSBM, it's like that cringe Viking-y style that I just can't get with. It's like, wow, my ancestors, my heritage. Like, okay, this album's not to be proud of though, so like, I don't know why you care. The highlights of this album are when this thick and raw like organ like dominates the whole thing. It's a really awesome texture. I will admit, I think it sounds amazing when it does that, but it doesn't always have that. But this album just kind of meanders a lot too. It's really meditative for like the second track. That's a part that I also enjoy. It doesn't always really get like that. It's not really atmospheric though. It doesn't really make you settle in at all. Also, at least from where I heard it, it was way too compressed for its own good. Half the riffs didn't even like come out. Like half of them were like inaudible. This album here is okay. Some people love it though. So I mean, if you could find a better rip, like I don't know, on some like torrent website, then maybe you'll enjoy it more than I do. But hey, that's just what I think. Next is Lana Shore with Immortal. I got a comment on this earlier, and you're correct. This one's DQ'd. It is literally deathcore. It's literally not black metal. It's not even like close to black metal, except the symphonic elements that sound really good on this album. I'll admit, the symphonic elements on Immortal here are strong. They don't really carry the album though. It's deathcore, and deathcore is like inherently flawed. It's like faster death metal part that's like the riffs aren't that good. It's all very heavy sounding, and then you get the breakdown, and then the subsequent breakdown that is now way slower. First time the album does that, I was like, whoa, awesome, sounds good. I think that might have been the track Immortal actually, but after that I was like, okay, I get it, like you've done that. I mean, I'm not the kind of person to like hate deathcore. I just think this is like inherently flawed via deathcore. I've heard that Lana Shore has better albums, but Immortal's okay. I'm not like loving it or hating it. It's just kind of all right. But up next, we got Inquisition. Bloodshed across the Empyrean altar, beyond the celestial zenith, from I believe 2016. If you like Immortal, but you want something more like evil, but you don't want to listen to like Immortal's earliest stuff, and you want that later like riffy, like heavy riffy, thrashy drums style, listen to this album. This album's a straight banger. This album is straight up so good. Now, like straight up, like I don't know if you should support Inquisition. Not because of political affiliations. They do have some accusations of like wearing political stuff on stage, but like that's not the first time a black metal band has done that, and I'm 99% sure it was to be edgy, which I mean, Hellhammer did that in the 90s all the time. Even Dark Throne, which was recently pointed out, they said that like critiquing Transylvanian hunger was like Jewish behavior, which was like obviously a joke. Like they didn't actually believe that, because Fenriz is just like a friendly guy now and he just talks with everyone. But like, I don't think Inquisition are fascist in nature at all. But either way, this album's still like a banger. It's still so good. The melodies are insane. And the thing about like this stuff is that like I love Abbath's style. Abbath has like a lot more guitar like tricks to it, but this is straight up like the riff. The whole guitar is used, all 6 strings, and it's all these just crazy chord formations. And you've got like, instead of like Abbath not providing his own bottom end, like this band is 2 members, by the way, and the guitarist doesn't play a bass in the recordings. He just does guitar and these froggy vocals, and it's so evil and so mysterious and like spacey, which a lot of people say Inquisition might be like cosmic black metal in a way. It does have a lot of space references, It's like adjacent to cosmic black metal, not in like the weird hipster like, whoa, the song's boring, it's cosmic. No, it's like actually super good. And the style is just so dense riff wise, and the drums are insane. It's like meditative and ritualistic at the same time. And then it's also like hooky too. Like on the track Wings of Anu, he's like, you hear like this crazy melody, and he's like, Wings of Anu. And I'm like, whoa. Like, I mean, I don't know who Anu is, but like, I mean, he's got some wings. The track Vortex, that's not its actual name, but it's like 50 words, but I'm calling it Vortex. Those riffs are killer. This album's killer. It's awesome. Listen to it. It's great. Up next is Ostenheim with Heimweh. This is another recent release, so not high hopes. Could be good, could be terrible, could be the worst thing I've ever heard. Good news though, it's not the worst thing I've ever heard. It's actually kind of great. It's like sort of like pagan, folky black metal, but it's got like really ferocious vocals, which I mean I'm a sucker for. And there's synths on this album that sound like they're real instruments, like strings or horns. Maybe like every once in a while you're like, not quite. It could be from the production here, just the whole thing kind of swamps it, so it all just sounds real as a result. But honestly, either way you put it, it sounds awesome. It's also like really moody. Like it's super easy to sink into this album and just kind of like, I don't know, pretend you're like a druid or something. Makes me kind of wonder if like Varg would like this album. He posts on like Twitter all the time, like that he doesn't even like black metal, but he likes Iron Maiden. And I'm like, but it's pagan, like you. He's kind of cringe now, but like, it's fun to mess with or just talk about. Just too interesting to pass up. Anyways, the final track on this project might be my favorite here because it's such an excellent ender. It's really percussive and wrathful, and it kind of encapsulates that feeling from the entire rest of the project. So weird to say this, but like a recent release, again, is great. Next is Odle with Wildcraft. Now, this is lo-fi, melodic, slightly depressive black metal. Unfortunately, this is another victim of poor production because the riffs are just too compressed to sound all that good. But honestly, the vocals are great, and the song structures are pretty cool too. And the guitar and bass overall has a massive, thick presence, which sounds interesting, but like none of it's all that like recognizable or memorable. I think this is a solid release. I think it's good, but like you won't have an issue if you listen to it. I will honestly say, if you listen to it, you should thoroughly enjoy it. It just certainly leaves like a lot to be desired, I guess. Up next is Horn with Naturecraft. This is a band that Mew is all over this month, like on all the Nothing But Black Metal November threads. First person is like, first for Horn, and it's like, why? They're not that good. It's like raw atmospheric black metal, kind of like Soya's, but like less atmospheric and more audible. Some of the melodies are decent, some really lack. The issue's like half this track list has like an issue to the song. In terms of like tone, the whole like sound of this album is just kind of weird. And honestly, like not all this album is that entertaining. It's kind of boring. But I will say that the last track is really moody. Even if it's not that like interesting, it's an easy track to sink into. So I'll give it that. And for that, I give this album an okay. Meanwhile, this next album is not okay. But it is incredible. This is Dark Space with Dark Space 3. I own this album on CD. I don't have it on me because I'm in another state than my CD collection, which I should do an update for because I don't think I showed you guys my Dark Space 3 CD or mention it for that matter. But I didn't consider it a re-listen because I've only listened to it in my car, really. I've never really sunk into it for one full thing. But oh my lord, this album is insane. It's similar to Paysage d'Hiver, which Winter is on Dark Space if you do not know. I need to listen to the other Dark Space albums because everyone says they all have like a different sort of like approach to this cosmic black metal genre, which I don't think there's a single cosmic black metal list you could find anywhere where Dark Space isn't firmly in the #1 position. Everyone's like, oh, Mercognitum's decent. Oh, Spectral Lore is cool too. Oh, but Dark Space is the best band in this genre. If you wanted Paysage d'Hiver to be like less meditative and more like scary and make it more feel like your body is being torn apart by the very vectors of space, then Dark Space is for you. This is a crushing listen with really dense guitars and really interesting spacey, like subtle synth effects. It's just like this little bright little tone that'll like just add into the mix. before just a super crushing rhythm guitar. Which this album's mostly like rhythmic. It's like very primitive, but it's so primitive. It's like your connection to the cosmos has been realized, and it's like, and for your sins of forgetting this connection, its very essence will tear you apart. The lower guitar parts are just insane for this composition, and it really adds a whole lot of flavor here that are not in most black metal albums in general. And it's weird seeing a band like Migwa have like rhythm guitar that just kind of swamps up the mix and doesn't add that much. But meanwhile, like Dark Space, it's like this is a specific feature that you will feel so strongly. But that's enough about Dark Space 3, because that album's great, and chances are I didn't even need to tell you that. After that, we have Immortal with their sole release on this list here, with their debut, because I picked a less popular album from a band, because that band has two not very popular albums, that and Blizzard Beasts, which I need to cover probably sometime in the future. But here we have Full Moon Diabolical Mysticism. Now, here's the thing about this album. I'm pretty disappointed by it, because their next album, Pure Holocaust, is amazing. It's so evil. It's so just like pounding and crushing. And Immortal doesn't normally sound evil, but like Pure Holocaust, you look at that album cover and you're like, whoa, it's kind of cult. It's not as like fuzzy as like those rectangular demo images, but it's like these three dudes up there, and you're like, what are they going to do? Probably going to like suck blood or something. Anyway, I love Immortal so much, and I just want to say that, because if you don't like Immortal, then like give them another shot, or you'll never be happy. But Full Moon Diabolical Mysticism's mixing is absolute garbage. This thing was clearly made by like 18, 17-year-olds, and you can hear it. It's so swampy. It's like you can barely pick out a riff, which isn't always a downside. Philosophem does that a lot, and I love it. But here, for like the first like couple tracks, you're just like, wow, I can barely hear it. That being said, the garbage mixing doesn't always come off as like a huge detriment. The atmosphere is here. The vocals here are much less froggy than Abbott's normal style, which is super interesting, because I know him for being... Some people say he has bad frog vocals, but I totally disagree. I think his frog vocals are super cool. But here they're like screamy. They're like wretched and like screamy, which is pretty fun. Like, it's a good element. And as much as I don't like that much most of this track list, the final song, which is this huge epic track that's more than double the length of any other song here, is just awesome. Yeah, A Perfect Vision of Rising Northland is the track. It has like an acoustic bit in the middle, and the guitars are so noisy and they work just so well. It's just this really aggressive sound overall. It's a really good atmospheric mix with like thrashy black metal elements, super strong. Unfortunately, I think this album's just okay. I know some people really enjoy this album, but the thing with Immortal is like everyone knows their demos aren't that good, because those are more like death metal. Old Funerals, like they're kind of silly. Like they're not like bad, I guess, but like they're more of like a novelty more than anything. And then Immortal's first album certainly has like good ideas, but it is honestly astounding how much they improved for Pure Holocaust, because Pure Holocaust is just insane as an album. It's just so good. But honestly, you listen to this and it doesn't even feel much like an Immortal album. Like Pure Holocaust feels different from that, because Abbott has a slightly more like wretched, like slightly froggier vocal style, and it's just a little bit cleaned up in the production department. It's still raw. It's still so dense, but you really feel how aggressive it is. It's like a war-ish album. It's not war metal, but you get what I'm saying. But yeah, that's another 20 albums. Hope you guys enjoyed. Glad we got a couple of the DQs and the bad albums out of the way, so the last 20 hopefully will satisfy you guys. But what did you guys think? Have you listened to any of these albums? If so, what are your thoughts? What did you guys cover for Nothing But Black Metal November? Did you cover Horn? A lot of people liked Horn. Not me that much, I guys. But that's about it. Hope you guys are doing well. Go ahead and like and subscribe. Join my social medias in the description. If Instagram's going to load this time. My Discord server is linked, which I've been doing more stuff on recently. So totally join. We'll have a good time. Hope to see you guys next time with one final part for Nothing But Black Metal November. And that's about it. Have a good one. Bye.